The sound of a champagne flute tapping for attention is usually a prelude to joy. But for Amelia Reed, it was the opening bell for her public execution. In the heart of New York's most exclusive restaurant, surrounded by the city's elite, her ex-husband Ethan Caldwell stood with his arm draped around a stunning heiress. He wasn't just announcing his new engagement. He was about to publicly rewrite their entire history, painting her as a footnote, a mistake, a charity case he was finally free of. She sat there frozen in a spotlight of pity, having no idea that an unopened letter on her coffee table held a secret, a 9-0 secret that would not only save her, but would unleash a wave of karma so devastating it would bring Ethan's gilded world crashing down into absolute ruin. The air in Per Se, a restaurant perched high above Columbus Circle, was thick with the scent of white truffles and self-congratulation. It was a place where fortunes were discussed in hushed tones and reputations were made or broken over a $400 tasting menu. For Amelia Reed, it felt like a different planet. She clutched her simple black clutch, the worn leather a stark contrast to the glittering Chanel and Hermes bags on the surrounding chairs. Ethan had invited her. An amicable divorce celebration, he'd called it on the phone, his voice dripping with a magnanimity she knew he didn't possess. A final toast to our shared past before we both move on to bigger and better things, he'd said. Bigger and better things for him, she knew. For her, it meant moving from their shared Upper East Side apartment to a cramped studio in Queens with a window overlooking a brick wall. He'd insisted she come, framing it as a chance for closure. Against her better judgment and the frantic warnings of her best friend Chloe, Amelia had agreed. A small, naive part of her hoped it might be a genuine olive branch, a final moment of civility. She saw him across the room holding court. Ethan Caldwell was a man sculpted by ambition. His tailored Tom Ford suit fit him like a second skin. His smile was a weapon, and his eyes had the cold, predatory gleam of the Wall Street shark he was rapidly becoming. Beside him was Isabella Vance, daughter of a real estate tycoon, a woman who looked less like she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth and more like she'd had it surgically attached. Her diamonds caught the light, scattering tiny, sharp rainbows across the room. When Ethan finally beckoned her over, the table of his associates and Isabella's friends fell into a polite, watchful silence. Amelia felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, dissecting her simple department store dress, her modest jewelry, her quiet anxiety. "Amelia, so glad you could make it!" Ethan boomed, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. He kissed her on the cheek, a gesture so performative it felt like a slap. "Everyone, this is Amelia. We shared a few years together. She was a great help to me in the early days." The condescension was a physical blow. A few years had been a decade of her life, a decade where she'd worked 2 jobs to support them while he got his MBA, proofread his proposals until 3 a.m., and coached him through his crippling fear of public speaking. A great help was the ultimate understatement for the woman who had built the scaffolding for his entire career. She smiled weakly, murmuring hellos. Isabella didn't even stand. She simply extended a languid hand, her rings cold against Amelia's skin. "So lovely to finally meet you," Isabella purred, her tone suggesting the exact opposite. "Ethan has told me so much about you." The meal was an exercise in torture. The conversation swirled around them. Trips to Gstaad, IPOs, the Hamptons summer circuit, a language from a world Amelia had only ever glimpsed through the window Ethan had briefly opened for her. He would occasionally throw a patronizing comment her way. "Amelia's more of a homebody, aren't you, sweetie? She loves her books." The table would chuckle politely, as if at a quaint zookeeper's observation. Then came the moment. Ethan stood tapping his champagne flute with a knife. The restaurant chatter dimmed. "Friends, colleagues," he began, his arm tightening around Isabella's bare shoulders. "Thank you for joining us tonight. As many of you know, the last year has been one of incredible transition and growth for me. I've shed some unproductive assets." He glanced at Amelia, a flicker of a smirk on his lips. The table caught it. A few of his finance bros snickered, and acquired some truly invaluable ones. He looked down at Isabella, his voice softening into a rehearsed romantic cadence. Isabella, you are my future. You are the partner I deserve, a woman who inspires me, who challenges me, who matches my ambition. He reached into his pocket and produced a velvet box. Inside was a diamond that looked like a shard of a fallen star. Isabella Vance, will you make me the happiest man in New York City and be my wife? The table erupted in applause. Isabella feigned surprise before melting into his arms for a passionate, camera-ready kiss. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't a closure dinner. It was a coronation, and she was the public sacrifice. But Ethan wasn't finished. After the congratulations died down, he raised his glass again, his eyes locking on Amelia. "And one final toast," he said, his voice ringing with false sincerity. "To Amelia. Our divorce was finalized this morning, and I want to wish her the best. It's not easy starting over, I know. So as a gesture of goodwill, a final parting gift, I've taken the liberty of paying her next 3 months' rent." The table gasped, followed by a wave of pitying murmurs. It was a masterstroke of cruelty disguised as charity. He had just announced to a room full of New York's most influential people that his ex-wife was a destitute project, a woman so helpless she couldn't even pay her own rent. He had stripped her of her last shred of dignity, branding her a failure in front of the very world he so desperately wanted to impress. Amelia felt the floor drop out from under her. The air was thin. She could feel the stares, the whispers. She saw Isabella's triumphant smile over Ethan's shoulder. She wanted to scream, to throw a drink, to vanish. Instead, she did the only thing she could. She stood up, her legs trembling. "Congratulations," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I wish you both everything you deserve." She turned and walked away, not daring to run. Every step was an agony. She could feel their eyes on her back, her departure serving as the final perfect piece of theater for Ethan's grand performance. She didn't stop walking until she was on the subway platform, the screech of the train wheels a welcome scream that drowned out the sound of her own shattering heart. She rode the train back to her tiny empty apartment in Queens, the public humiliation clinging to her like a shroud. On her worn coffee table sat a pile of mail, including a thick cream-colored envelope with a prestigious law firm's crest embossed in the corner. In her despair, she ignored it, unaware that it was not an ending, but a cataclysmic beginning. For 2 days, Amelia existed in a gray fog. She didn't answer Chloe's frantic calls. She didn't eat. The memory of the restaurant, of Ethan's cruel, pitying smile played on a loop in her mind. His gift of 3 months' rent was the most exquisitely painful part. It wasn't just an insult. It was a chain, a reminder of her dependency and his perceived magnanimity. She was Amelia Reed, the charity case. On the 3rd morning, fueled by a grim determination to simply survive, she finally tackled the pile of mail. Bill's junk mail, and then the heavy cream envelope. It felt important, official. The return address was Harrison and Finch, LLP. A name that sounded old, powerful, and expensive. She slid it open with a kitchen knife. The letter inside was brief and formal. It requested her presence at their offices on Park Avenue at her earliest convenience regarding the estate of the late Mr. Arthur Blackwood. The name meant almost nothing to her. Blackwood. Her mother's side. A great-uncle, she thought, a reclusive, eccentric old man she'd met only once at a family funeral when she was a child. He had given her a strange silver locket and told her to never let anyone dull your shine. She'd long since lost the locket. Curiosity, a flicker of emotion in her otherwise numb state, propelled her to call the number. A polite but firm secretary scheduled her for the following afternoon. The offices of Harrison and Finch were a world away from her Queens studio. Polished mahogany, thick Persian rugs that swallowed the sound of her footsteps, and the hushed, reverent air of old money. She was led to a corner office with a panoramic view of Central Park. An elderly man with kind eyes and a perfectly tailored suit rose to greet her. "Ms. Reed, I'm Jonathan Harrison. Thank you for coming. Please sit. She sat on a leather chair that was softer than her own bed. Mr. Harrison took his seat behind a large, imposing desk, a thick, leather-bound document in front of him. I was your great-uncle Arthur's attorney and friend for over 40 years, he began, his voice gentle. I am the executor of his will. I'm sorry to inform you that Arthur passed away 2 weeks ago peacefully in his sleep. Oh! Amelia said, a pang of sadness for the man she barely knew. I'm sorry to hear that. He was a unique man, Mr. Harrison said with a fond smile. Very private. He kept a close eye on his family even from a distance. He was particularly fond of you, Amelia. Me? He barely knew me. He saw more than you think. He followed your life. He knew of your marriage to Mr. Caldwell. He knew of your sacrifices, your support for his career. And Mr. Harrison's eyes held a hint of steel. He was profoundly disappointed by the terms of your divorce settlement. Amelia flinched. It was what Ethan thought was fair. Arthur did not agree, he said simply. He slid the leather-bound document across the desk. This is his last will and testament. It is quite straightforward. Aside from a few bequests to his staff and some charities, he has named a single heir. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Amelia's heart began to beat a little faster. She thought maybe he'd left her a small token, a few $1,000s perhaps. Enough to refuse Ethan's humiliating rent money. That alone would be a victory. Arthur Blackwood was a brilliant, if unconventional investor, Mr. Harrison continued. He started with a small inheritance and over 60 years quietly built a global empire. He owned commercial real estate in London, tech startups in Silicon Valley, vast art collections, and a controlling interest in a private holding company, Blackwood Industries, with stakes in everything from sustainable energy to pharmaceuticals. He leaned forward, his gaze direct and unwavering. Amelia, Arthur has left his entire estate to you. Amelia stared at him, the words not quite registering. His entire estate? Yes. What does that... what is the value? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Harrison took a deep breath. The initial valuations are still being finalized, but we are looking at a net worth. Well, let me put it this way. The liquid assets, stocks, and cash holdings alone are in excess of $800 million. Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. Her vision swam. 800 million. The number was nonsensical in abstraction. But that's not all, he said, his voice dropping slightly. The real value is in Blackwood Industries and the real estate portfolio. Once everything is properly appraised, your inheritance, Ms. Reed, will be in the region of $3.2 billion. Billion. The word hung in the air, a monstrous, beautiful, terrifying thing. Amelia gripped the arms of the chair to keep from falling out of it. She thought of her $200 grocery budget. She thought of the coin-operated laundry in her building's basement. She thought of Ethan's triumphant announcement that he would pay her $500 a month rent. The sheer cosmic absurdity of it all washed over her in a wave of hysterical, silent laughter. Mr. Harrison, seeing the shock on her face, slid a glass of water towards her. It's a lot to take in, I know. Arthur left a personal letter for you as well. He handed her another smaller envelope. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was a spidery, elegant script from a bygone era. My dearest Amelia, if you are reading this, then I have gone on to my next great adventure. I am sorry we did not have more time. I watched you from afar, and in you I saw your grandmother's spirit, a kindness and a strength that the world often mistakes for weakness. I saw you give your light to a man who only sought to cast a larger shadow. This inheritance is not a gift. It is a tool. It is freedom. It is power. Use it to build a life of your own design, not one in service to someone else's ambition. Do not let them dull your shine ever again. That man sought to make you small, to make you a footnote in his story. Now you have the power to buy the entire library. Your loving Uncle Arthur. Tears streamed down Amelia's face, washing away the gray fog of the past few days. They weren't tears of grief or shock, but of overwhelming, earth-shattering validation. Someone had seen her. Someone had valued her. She looked up at Mr. Harrison, a new light in her eyes. The humiliation, the pity, the feeling of being worthless, it all began to recede, replaced by a nascent, unfamiliar sensation. Power. Mr. Harrison, she said, her voice clear and steady for the first time in days. Where do we begin? The first week of being a billionaire was less about champagne and shopping sprees, and more about clandestine meetings in Mr. Harrison's boardroom. Amelia felt like she was cramming for the most important exam of her life. She met with wealth managers, tax attorneys, and security consultants. The numbers they discussed were so vast they felt like fiction portfolios, trusts, foundations. Her first directive was simple and absolute secrecy. No one can know, she told Mr. Harrison. Not yet. I don't want my name associated with the Blackwood estate in any public filing. We use shell corporations, trusts, whatever it takes. For now, Amelia Reed does not exist in this world. Mr. Harrison, impressed by her immediate grasp of the situation, agreed. Prudent. Very prudent. Arthur would be pleased. Amelia's second act was personal. She walked into her job at the local library where she'd been earning $19 an hour, shelving books and managing the front desk. She quietly handed her sweet elderly boss, Mrs. Gable, her resignation. Is everything all right, dear? Mrs. Gable asked, concerned. Everything is finally going to be all right, Amelia replied with a genuine smile, giving the woman a hug. Her third act was liberating. Through a discreet real estate agent recommended by Mr. Harrison's firm, she leased a magnificent penthouse apartment in a secure, anonymous building overlooking the Hudson River. It was listed under a corporate name. She paid for the year up front. She packed a single suitcase from her Queens studio, leaving everything else behind: the cheap furniture, the bad memories, the life that was no longer hers. She didn't leave a forwarding address. She then called her best friend Chloe, who was on the verge of filing a missing person report. Amelia. Oh my God, where have you been? I was about to call the cops. Are you okay? Did that bastard Ethan do something else? Amelia took a deep breath. Chloe, can you meet me? I have something to tell you, and you need to be sitting down. They met at a quiet, out-of-the-way cafe. When Amelia told her the story, Chloe's jaw progressively dropped until it was practically on the table. She stared speechless, then burst out laughing. 3 billion, she finally choked out, wiping tears from her eyes. Oh, this is better than a movie, that pompous arrogant. Oh, the look on his face when he finds out. We have to do something. Buy his company and fire him. Buy his building and evict him. No, Amelia said calmly, a serene confidence settling over her. That's his game, not mine. Revenge is loud and messy. I'm thinking of something quieter. Something more structural. While Amelia was quietly restructuring her entire existence, Ethan and Isabella were loudly celebrating theirs. They were the city's new power couple. Photos of their engagement party were splashed across society pages. Isabella was flaunting her colossal ring, while Ethan was leveraging his new connection to the Vance family's real estate empire to climb even higher at his venture capital firm, Apex Capital. He and Isabella often talked about Amelia, always in a joking, dismissive way. Did you hear her little parting shot at the party? Isabella scoffed one evening, sipping champagne in their lavish apartment. I wish you everything you deserve. So pathetic and dramatic. What can you expect? Ethan said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. She's always been small time, that's why I had to cut her loose. You can't soar with eagles if you're tethered to a sparrow. He chuckled. I almost feel bad for her. It's a cold world out there when you don't have my protection. Paying her rent for a few months was the least I could do. Good for my image, too. Shows I'm a compassionate guy. He had already forgotten the check he'd mailed to her old address. He had no idea it had been sent back unopened, marked, "Return to sender, addressee unknown." He was too busy soaring to notice the ground had fundamentally shifted beneath him. Amelia, meanwhile, was learning. She spent her days with her team devouring information. She discovered that her great-uncle Arthur was a man of quiet principles. He invested in companies that were innovative and ethical. He avoided the cutthroat slash-and-burn tactics favored by men like Ethan. Arthur built things. Ethan broke them for profit. One afternoon, a financial analyst was briefing Amelia on a portfolio of smaller, more speculative investments held by Blackwood Industries. He pointed to one. "This one's a bit of a dog, Ms. Reed. A legacy investment of Arthur's. A small independent publishing house, Viridian Press. They focus on literary fiction and poetry, consistently lose money. We'd recommend divesting and writing off the loss." Amelia looked at the file. She saw photos of the company's headquarters, a charming old brownstone in Greenwich Village. It was struggling, but it was beautiful. It published the kind of book she used to dream of writing before she'd rerouted her life to support Ethan's. "No," Amelia said firmly. "Don't sell it. In fact, I want you to quietly inject enough capital to make them solvent for the next 5 years. And send a message to the editor-in-chief. Tell them an anonymous benefactor believes in their mission." This was her first real move as a billionaire. It wasn't about buying a yacht or a jet. It was about saving something beautiful. It was the first brick she laid in the foundation of her new life. She was moving her pieces across the board, setting up a new game Ethan didn't even know he was playing. The sparrow, it turned out, was learning to command a fleet of eagles. For the next 2 months, Amelia Reed, the public person, effectively vanished. Ethan and Isabella, consumed by their own whirlwind of wedding planning and social climbing, barely gave her a second thought. If she crossed Ethan's mind at all, it was with a vague sense of pity, picturing her struggling in her sad little queen's apartment. Amelia, however, was undergoing a profound metamorphosis. Guided by Mr. Harrison and a hand-picked team, she wasn't just learning to manage wealth. She was learning to wield it. She hired a quiet, unassuming stylist who helped her build a wardrobe that was elegant and understated, a reflection of quiet confidence rather than flashy branding. She started working with a personal trainer, the physical exertion, a welcome outlet for the years of pent-up frustration. The changes weren't just external. The timid, accommodating woman who had walked out of Per Se was being replaced by someone more deliberate, more composed. The money hadn't changed her core kindness, but it had forged an armor of self-worth around it. Her first public ripple was not a splash, but a carefully calculated tremor. One of her financial advisors brought a real estate deal to her attention. A developer was trying to buy up an entire block in the West Village to tear it down for a luxury glass and steel condo tower. Several small businesses were being forced out, including a beloved 70-year-old independent bookstore called The Last Chapter. Amelia remembered spending hours in that store when she was younger, losing herself in the stacks. It was a place of magic and history. "Who's the developer?" she asked, her tone casual. The advisor checked his tablet. "A subsidiary of Vance Real Estate in partnership with a VC firm called Apex Capital. It's a big project for them." Amelia's heart gave a little jolt. Isabella's father. Ethan's firm. Of course. They weren't just building a condo. They were erasing a piece of the city's soul for profit. "I see," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Mr. Harrison, I'd like to make a counteroffer on that entire block." "The whole block, Ms. Reed?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "The whole block," she confirmed. "Use a holding company from the Blackwood portfolio. Offer them 30% above the current bid. All cash. Close in 7 days. And make sure the offer is completely anonymous. The seller is to be known only as the Reed Foundation." It was the name she had chosen for the charitable arm of her new empire. The deal was a thunderclap in the New York real estate world. An unknown, massively funded entity swooping in and snatching a prime development block out from under Vance and Apex Capital was unheard of. The sellers thrilled with the massive premium accepted immediately. The news reached Ethan via a furious phone call from his future father-in-law, Marcus Vance. "What the hell happened, Caldwell?" Marcus boomed. "My team said Apex had the financing locked down. Now some ghost foundation comes out of nowhere and snipes the whole project. It makes us look like amateurs." Ethan was stunned. "The Reed Foundation, I've never heard of them. Let me make some calls." He spent the next day digging but hit nothing but brick walls. The foundation was a ghost, its funding sources hidden behind layers of impenetrable legal and financial structures. All he knew was that they had a seemingly bottomless well of cash and had just cost his firm and his fiancée's family millions in potential profit. He was humiliated and furious. A week later, a story appeared in the New York Times. It reported that the mysterious Reed Foundation, the new owner of the West Village block, had announced its plans. There would be no condo. Instead, the foundation was granting 100-year leases to all the existing small business tenants, including the Last Chapter bookstore, for the symbolic price of $1 per year. Furthermore, the foundation was investing millions to restore the historic facades of the buildings. The story was a PR sensation. The city hailed the anonymous philanthropist as a hero, a savior of New York's cultural heritage. Chloe sent the article to Amelia with a string of champagne-popping emojis. "Buying the library indeed, I love this game." Amelia read the article from her penthouse, a quiet sense of satisfaction warming her. It wasn't revenge. It was better than revenge. It was restoration. It was using her power to protect the things that people like Ethan saw as obstacles to progress. Ethan read the same article in his office at Apex Capital, his knuckles white as he gripped his phone. "The Reed Foundation," he muttered. The name gnawed at him. Reed. It had to be a coincidence. It was a common enough name. It couldn't possibly be her. The thought was so ludicrous, so utterly impossible, that he dismissed it immediately. Amelia Reed was probably struggling to buy groceries. The idea that she could command the kind of capital to pull off a move like this was laughable. Still, for the first time in his life, a project he had deemed a sure thing had been derailed by a force he couldn't see and didn't understand. A tiny hairline crack appeared in the foundation of his perfect, invincible world. He didn't know it yet, but it was the first tremor of a coming earthquake, and its epicenter was the very woman he had so gleefully discarded and humiliated. The annual Metropolitan Arts Gala was the apex of the New York social calendar, a glittering affair where finance, fashion, and fame collided. For Ethan and Isabella, it was their official debut as the city's ultimate power couple. Isabella was draped in a custom Oscar de la Renta gown, her Vance family diamonds glittering at her throat. Ethan, in a bespoke tuxedo, looked every bit the master of the universe. They posed for the paparazzi on the steps of the Met, a perfect picture of wealth and influence. Inside, they worked the room schmoozing with bank CEOs and tech moguls. Ethan was in his element, dropping names and closing deals between sips of champagne. Halfway through the evening, a subtle shift occurred in the room's energy. A low murmur started near the grand entrance and spread like a wave. Heads began to turn. Conversations trailed off. Ethan, annoyed by the distraction, turned to see what the commotion was about. And then he saw her. Amelia Reed was standing at the top of the grand staircase. But it wasn't the Amelia he knew. The mousy, hesitant woman from the restaurant was gone. This woman was poised radiant. She wore a simple, breathtakingly elegant sapphire blue gown by a couturier so exclusive it made Isabella's designer dress look common. Her only jewelry was a magnificent diamond necklace that had once belonged to a European royal, a piece from Arthur Blackwood's private collection. Her hair was styled in a classic chignon, and her expression was one of serene, unassailable confidence. She wasn't alone. On one side was the highly respected Jonathan Harrison. On the other was a handsome, distinguished man Ethan recognized with a jolt, Julian Croft, the world-renowned architect, and a notoriously private figure who rarely attended such events. Isabella saw her at the same moment. "My God!" she breathed, her perfectly made-up face a mask of disbelief. "Is that your ex-wife? What is she doing here?" Ethan was frozen, his mind refusing to process the scene. It made no sense. How could Amelia afford the ticket, let alone the dress? Who was she with? It was like watching a character from a sitcom wander onto the set of a prestige drama. Before he could formulate a coherent thought, the host of the evening, a grande dame of New York society named Beatrice Astor, swept towards Amelia, her arms outstretched. "Amelia, my dear," Beatrice exclaimed, her voice carrying across the now hushed room. "We are so utterly thrilled you could join us tonight. The entire board wants to thank you personally. Your foundation's donation is the largest in the museum's history. You've single-handedly saved the new Impressionist wing." The collective gasp in the room was almost audible. Her foundation. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. The Reed Foundation. It was her. The ghost who had outbid him. The philanthropist saving bookstores. The mysterious force that had cost him millions. It was Amelia. His meek, unassuming starter wife, Amelia. The floor seemed to tilt beneath his feet. He saw people around him, people he had spent years trying to impress, staring at Amelia with awe and respect. They were looking at her the way he had always wanted them to look at him. Isabella was piecing it together as well, her face contorting with a mixture of fury and envy. Her foundation? What is going on, Ethan? You told me she was nobody. You told me she was broke. Amelia began to descend the staircase, moving with an unhurried grace. As she passed people, they parted for her. She nodded politely, her smile calm and genuine. Her eyes swept the room, and for a brief electric moment they met Ethan's. There was no malice in her gaze, no triumph. There was just a quiet dismissal. It was the look one gives to a stranger, a piece of furniture, something utterly irrelevant. In that single fleeting glance he understood. She wasn't just wealthy, she was powerful. And in her world he no longer mattered. That look was more devastating than any public shouting match could ever have been. It vaporized his ego. He felt a desperate primal urge to reassert control, to put her back in the box he had created for her. He started towards her, dragging Isabella by the arm. "Amelia," he said, his voice strained. He tried for a casual, friendly tone, but it came out as a strangled croak. "Fancy seeing you here. You're looking well." Amelia turned to him fully. The proximity was dizzying. He could smell her perfume. It was subtle and expensive. "Ethan, Isabella," she said, her voice even and cool. "Good evening." "What is all this?" Ethan demanded, his composure cracking. "The Reed Foundation. The museum donation. Where did you get that kind of money?" Amelia simply smiled. "I came into a family inheritance." It was the simplest truth and the most brutal. It meant her success had nothing to do with him. Isabella, recovering her venom, stepped forward. "An inheritance. How convenient. I suppose you think a little money makes you one of us now. You're still the same pathetic girl from Queens, just in a prettier dress." Before Amelia could respond, the architect Julian Croft stepped slightly in front of her, a protective gesture. "I believe you are at the wrong party," he said to Isabella, his voice low and firm. "This is a celebration of art and philanthropy, not pettiness and envy." Ethan felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. This man defending his Amelia. He wanted to grab him to shout, but he was surrounded by the city's elite. He was trapped. Amelia placed a calming hand on Julian's arm. She looked directly at Ethan, her eyes clear. "Ethan, the last time we spoke you wished me everything I deserve. As it turns out, I got it. I truly hope the same for you." She then turned her back on them, a final effortless dismissal, and allowed Julian to guide her towards the museum's chairman. The crowd closed around her, welcoming her into their inner circle, leaving Ethan and Isabella standing alone in her wake, looking like intruders at their own party. The spell was broken. Everyone had seen the exchange. They had seen the desperation on Ethan's face and the cool, unbothered power of his ex-wife. In a single evening, Amelia Reed had been reborn in New York society, while Ethan Caldwell, the man who thought he had authored her humiliation, had become a footnote in hers. He stumbled to the bar, his mind reeling. This wasn't just a change in fortune. This was a reversal of the laws of his universe. And he knew with a chilling certainty that this was only the beginning. The fallout from the Met Gala was swift and brutal. Ethan Caldwell became the laughingstock of Wall Street. The story was too delicious to resist. The high-flying VC shark publicly humiliated his mousy ex-wife, only for her to re-emerge as a mega-rich philanthropist who could buy and sell him 10 times over. His colleagues at Apex Capital looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. His rivals openly mocked him. "Heard your ex-wife is saving the world, Caldwell," one sneered at a conference. "Guess you should have negotiated a better alimony." Ethan's fury festered into obsession. He couldn't accept it. In his mind, Amelia's success was an affront, a cosmic error that needed to be corrected. He became convinced she was trying to destroy him. Every setback, every deal that went sour, he attributed to her shadowy influence. Isabella, meanwhile, was incensed. Her social standing was now tainted by her association with the man Amelia Reed had so spectacularly eclipsed. "You have to fix this, Ethan," she shrieked at him constantly. "You told me she was nothing. Now she's the talk of the town, and I look like the fool who married her sloppy seconds." Desperate to regain his status and prove he was still a major player, Ethan poured all his energy and capital into a single massive deal, the Helios project. It was a hugely ambitious, high-risk venture to build the world's largest solar power array in the Nevada desert. It required a colossal amount of funding, and Ethan had staked his reputation, his firm's capital, and a significant amount of Marcus Vance's money on making it happen. The final piece of the puzzle was securing a $500 million investment from a notoriously private old-money European investment fund called Argentum International. With Argentum on board, the project would be a go, and Ethan would be hailed as a visionary, catapulting him into the stratosphere of global finance. He spent weeks preparing his pitch, flying to Zurich and London, wining and dining Argentum's executives. They were tough, meticulous, and old school. But finally, after grueling negotiations, they gave him a verbal commitment. The deal was all but done. The contracts were being drawn up. Ethan felt the familiar rush of invincibility return. This would show them all. This would show Amelia. He would be bigger than her foundation, more powerful than her inherited money. A week before the deal was set to close, he was in a celebratory dinner with his team. His phone rang. It was the lead banker from Argentum. "Ethan, we have a problem," the banker said, his voice cold and distant. "A major problem." "What are you talking about, Klaus?" "We have a deal." "We had a deal," Klaus corrected him. "The final decision had to be ratified by our primary shareholder. It's usually just a formality." "And?" Ethan asked, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. "The primary shareholder has vetoed the investment. The deal is off. We are withdrawing from the Helios project effective immediately." Ethan's world went silent. "Vetoed on what grounds?" "Who is this shareholder? I want to talk to them." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That is not possible, and I am not at liberty to disclose their identity. I can only tell you the name of the holding company that controls their shares." "What is it?" Ethan barked. The banker's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Blackwood Industries." The name slammed into Ethan with the force of a physical impact. Blackwood. The name from Amelia's story. The source of her inheritance. He hung up the phone, his hands shaking. It couldn't be a coincidence. It was her. She had torpedoed his deal, his masterpiece, his salvation. He stormed out of the restaurant and drove directly to her building, the location of which he'd gotten from a private investigator he'd hired in a fit of paranoia. He bluffed his way past the doorman and took the private elevator to the penthouse. Amelia opened the door herself. She was in comfortable loungewear, holding a book. She didn't look surprised to see him, just weary. "Ethan," she said, "you shouldn't be here." "You did it, didn't you?" he snarled, pushing his way inside. The apartment was vast and beautiful with breathtaking views of the city. It was a palace. "You killed the Helios deal you told your people at Argentum to pull out." Amelia looked at him, her expression calm. "Blackwood Industries is a primary shareholder in Argentum, yes. They have been for 50 years. And when my financial board reviewed the Helios project, they found it to be an unacceptably reckless investment." "Reckless," he spat. "It was visionary. It was over-leveraged and built on wildly optimistic projections." She countered, her voice never rising. "My uncle Arthur built his empire by investing in sound, sustainable ventures, not by gambling. The board and I concluded that the risk was too great. It was a simple business decision, Ethan." The cold, clinical logic of her explanation was more infuriating than any confession of revenge. She hadn't done it out of spite. She had done it because his grand vision was to her and her team of experts a bad bet. She had dismissed his life's work as a poor investment. "A business decision!" He laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You've ruined me. You did this to get back at me for the restaurant, for everything." Amelia finally let a flicker of emotion show. Not anger, but a profound sadness. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about you, Ethan. Not anymore. I didn't spend a single second thinking about you when we made this decision. I was thinking about my fiduciary duty to my uncle's legacy. You are a line item on a risk assessment report, that's all." Her words stripped him bare. He wasn't her arch nemesis. He wasn't even a factor. He was just bad business. "I made you," he whispered, a desperate, pathetic last stand. "Everything you learned about taste, about ambition, you learned from me." Amelia shook her head slowly. "No, Ethan, you didn't make me. You just revealed me to myself. You showed me exactly what I didn't want to be. And for that, I suppose I should be grateful." She walked to the door and held it open. "Now please leave." Defeated, he stumbled out. The door clicked shut behind him, closing off the world of power and light, leaving him alone in the hallway. The unraveling was complete. He had lost his deal, his reputation, and the last delusional vestiges of his superiority. All he had left was the long, dark fall that was to come. The collapse of the Helios project was the domino that toppled Ethan Caldwell's entire world. Without the Argentum funding, the other investors panicked and pulled out. The project imploded overnight, leaving Apex Capital on the hook for millions in preliminary costs and broken contracts. Marcus Vance was the first to cut him loose. He called Ethan into his office, his face a mask of cold fury. "You have not only lost my money, you have made my family a laughingstock. You are a reckless, incompetent fool. Your engagement to my daughter is over. Get out of my building." Isabella didn't even grant him a face-to-face breakup. A moving van arrived at their apartment the next day, manned by her father's employees. They packed only her belongings, leaving Ethan's things in disarray. She sent him a text message, "Don't ever contact me again. I'm with a winner, not a washed-up loser." A week later, she was photographed on a yacht in St. Bart's with a European prince. The board at Apex Capital, facing massive losses, and furious clients fired Ethan unceremoniously. They invoked a morality clause in his contract citing the reputational damage he had caused the firm. His stock options were voided. His bonuses were clawed back. He was forced to sell his apartment to cover his debts, but the market had softened and it wasn't enough. He was financially wiped out. Within a month, Ethan Caldwell went from being a Wall Street titan to a pariah. He lost his job, his fiancée, his home, and his fortune. He was forced to move into a small, run-down apartment in a dingy part of Brooklyn, an apartment smaller and more depressing than the one Amelia had lived in after their divorce. The irony was a bitter pill he was forced to swallow every single day. He tried to find another job in finance, but no one would touch him. The story of his spectacular downfall and its connection to his now famous ex-wife was too well known. The man who had once commanded boardrooms found himself applying for low-level analyst jobs and being rejected. His expensive suits hung in his closet like relics from another life. One rainy Tuesday broke, and desperate, he found himself standing outside a high-end restaurant where he'd once been a regular. He saw a former colleague pull up in a new Porsche. Ethan ducked into the alley to avoid being seen, the shame burning in his gut. It was in that moment, smelling the garbage from the restaurant kitchen, that he finally understood the full scope of what he had lost. He hadn't just lost money. He had lost his identity. He was nothing without the status and the power. Amelia, meanwhile, was building. The Reed Foundation became a global force for good. It funded medical research, built schools in underserved communities, and endowed arts programs. Amelia herself became a respected, if private, figure in the world of philanthropy. She found a deep sense of purpose in using Arthur's legacy to create positive change. She also rediscovered her own passions. She bought Viridian Press, the small publishing house, not as an investment but as a passion project. She worked with the editors to find and nurture new literary talent. She also set up a private art studio in her home, and for the first time in over a decade she began to paint again. Her work was vibrant and full of life. Her relationship with Julian Croft, the architect, blossomed. He was a kind, brilliant man who was drawn to her intelligence and her spirit, not her bank account. He loved listening to her ideas, challenging her, and seeing the world with her. Theirs was a partnership of equals built on mutual respect and genuine affection. One afternoon, she and Julian were walking through the West Village. They paused outside the last chapter, the bookstore she had saved. It was thriving, full of customers. Through the window, Amelia saw a young woman sitting in a worn armchair, completely lost in a book, a small smile on her face. In that moment, Amelia felt a profound sense of peace. Her life was no longer defined by Ethan or by the pain he had caused. It was defined by the good she could create, the beauty she could preserve, and the love she had found. She never saw Ethan again. She heard whispers now and then that he was working a dead-end sales job, that he was deep in debt. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a distant clinical pity. He had received exactly what he deserved, a life as small and empty as his own heart. Karma, she realized, wasn't a loud, vengeful thunderclap. It was a quiet, relentless balancing of the universal ledger. Ethan had built his life on a foundation of arrogance and cruelty, and it had crumbled into dust. Amelia had built hers on a foundation of kindness and integrity, and it had become a fortress of quiet, unshakable joy. She had not only bought the library, she was writing her own magnificent story, and it was just beginning. And so Amelia Reed's story comes full circle, not with a fiery act of revenge, but with the quiet, undeniable power of a life well lived. She went from being publicly shamed and discarded to a woman who reshaped her own destiny and the world around her for the better. Her story is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity, purpose, and self-worth. Ethan Caldwell tried to write her out of his story, but in the end he became a forgotten footnote in hers. Karma in its truest form isn't about punishment, it's about consequences. It's the universe handing you the bill for the life you chose to live. If this story of resilience, justice, and ultimate triumph resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their current circumstances don't define their future. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. What are your thoughts on Amelia's journey? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.
What happens when a life of unimaginable luxury becomes a gilded cage? For Catherine Sterling, a lavish Fifth Avenue penthouse and the love of a billionaire magnate was her fairy tale. But one glittering discovery, a $2.7 million diamond necklace not meant for her, shattered the illusion. Pregnant, betrayed, and financially frozen by a man who promised her forever, Catherine was left with nothing but her wits and a burning need for justice. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the story of how one woman turned her deepest humiliation into her greatest weapon, orchestrating a public spectacle so audacious it would bring a titan of industry to his knees. The silence in Catherine Sterling's world was a specific, expensive kind. It was the cushioned quiet of a sprawling 88th-floor penthouse overlooking Central Park, a silence buffered by triple-paned glass, thick-pile cashmere rugs, and the hushed deference of a full-time sound staff. It was the silence of a life curated to perfection, where every surface gleamed and every need was anticipated before it could be voiced. For 5 years, this had been her reality, her marriage to the tech magnate Marcus Thorne, a glittering testament to a modern-day fairy tale. At 34, Catherine possessed a serene beauty that photographers for magazines like Vogue and Town & Country loved to capture. She wasn't just a wife, she was an architect, though her career had been gently shelved after the wedding, replaced by philanthropic endeavors and the demanding full-time job of being Mrs. Thorne. Now, 7 months pregnant with their first child, a daughter, she felt a nesting instinct so powerful it was almost primal. She spent her days overseeing the design of a nursery that was less a room for a baby and more a miniature celestial palace, complete with a ceiling painted with the constellations as they would appear on her due date. Marcus was the sun around which her universe orbited. A self-made billionaire who had clawed his way up from a working-class neighborhood in Queens to the pinnacle of global finance and technology, he was a force of nature. His charisma was a high-voltage current that could power a room, and his ambition was a fire that never dimmed. He adored Catherine, or so she believed. He called her his North Star, the calm, steady point in his chaotic world. Lately, however, his orbit had become more erratic. The business trips grew more frequent. The late nights at the office stretched into the pre-dawn hours. He'd return smelling of expensive whiskey and the faint, unfamiliar scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, a delicate, spicy fragrance she couldn't place. When she'd ask, he'd kiss her forehead, his lips cool and murmur about new investors from Dubai or a critical server merger in Singapore. He was so convincing, his explanations so detailed, that to doubt him felt like a betrayal in itself. She was pregnant hormonal, she told herself. Of course, she was feeling insecure. Their 6th anniversary was approaching. It was a milestone Marcus always celebrated with extravagant flair. The first year, it was a private yacht in the Aegean Sea. The third, he'd rented out a wing of the Musée d'Orsay for a private dinner. This year, Catherine hoped for something quieter, more intimate before the baby arrived, and their world changed forever. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. Marcus was in London for a 24-hour emergency board meeting. The maid, a sweet woman named Rosa, was turning down the master bedroom when a small platinum-colored receipt slipped from the pocket of the Tom Ford suit jacket Marcus had tossed onto a valet chair. Rosa, ever meticulous, placed it on Catherine's bedside table. Catherine noticed it later that evening while reading a book on natural childbirth. It was from Leviev, the ultra-exclusive diamond merchant on Madison Avenue, a place whose jewels made Cartiers look like costume pieces. Her heart gave a little flutter of excitement. Marcus had outdone himself again. Her fingers, slightly swollen from the pregnancy, trembled as she read the details. The date of purchase was from 3 weeks prior, during his summit in Geneva. The item description was what made her breath catch in her throat: le cœur de la nuit. The heart of the night, a custom-designed necklace. The price made her eyes widen until they ached. $2,700,000. $2.75 million. It was an obscene amount of money, even for them. It was more than a gesture. It was a statement. A wave of guilt washed over her, forever doubting him. He was working so hard, crossing continents, and all the while he was planning this breathtaking surprise for her. She carefully folded the receipt and tucked it away, a warm, secret thrill running through her. The anniversary was in 4 days. The 4 days passed in a haze of happy anticipation. Catherine felt a renewed wave of love for her husband, a deep, abiding affection that overshadowed any lingering whispers of doubt. He was a good man. Her man. On the morning of their anniversary, she awoke to find Marcus beside her, already dressed in a crisp shirt, smelling of his signature Creed cologne. He was smiling, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners. "Happy anniversary, my North Star," he said, his voice a low purr. He handed her a beautifully wrapped rectangular box from Van Cleef & Arpels. It was a beautiful box, but it wasn't from Leviev. A flicker of confusion passed through her, but she quickly suppressed it. Perhaps the necklace was a separate surprise for later. She eagerly untied the ribbon. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a lovely Alhambra bracelet, the iconic 4-leaf clover design in mother-of-pearl and gold. It was classic, elegant, and expensive. It was probably worth $50,000. "It's beautiful, Marcus." "Truly," she said, and her gratitude was genuine. It was a stunning gift. But it wasn't a $2.75 million necklace. "I knew you'd love it," he said, fastening it around her wrist. "Simple, elegant, just like you." He kissed her, then a quick, perfunctory peck before glancing at his watch. "I'm sorry, my love, but the markets in Tokyo are going crazy. I have to take a conference call. I've made us a reservation at Per Se for tonight at 8. Wear that blue dress I love." And with that he was gone, leaving Catherine alone in the vast, silent bedroom. The gold bracelet felt strangely heavy on her wrist. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was oppressive. Where was le cœur de la nuit? The question gnawed at her all day. Maybe it was a surprise for dinner. Yes, that had to be it. He would present it to her over dessert, a grand, show-stopping finale to their anniversary celebration. She clung to that thought like a life raft. That evening she wore the cobalt-blue Brandon Maxwell gown he adored, the silk clinging to her baby bump. She felt beautiful, hopeful. At Per Se, with its panoramic views of Columbus Circle, the service was impeccable, the food a work of art. But Marcus was distracted. His phone buzzed incessantly on the table beside him. He kept checking it, his brow furrowed in concentration. He spoke of acquisitions and stock options, his words a wall between them. Dessert came and went, a delicate panna cotta with a single candle flickering in the center. He raised his glass of sparkling water to her glass of champagne. To us, Catherine. To the next chapter. But there was no other box, no grand reveal, just the check which he signed without looking at the total. The ride home in the chauffeured Maybach was silent. Catherine stared out the window at the glittering lights of the city, feeling a cold dread crystallize in her chest. The bracelet on her wrist felt like a prop. The entire evening had been a performance. Back in the penthouse, Marcus immediately headed to his study. "Just need to wrap up one last thing," he called over his shoulder. Catherine stood in the center of their enormous living room, the city lights spread out before her like a carpet of fallen stars. The doubt she had suppressed for weeks came roaring back, a tidal wave of sickening certainty. There was no innocent explanation. Her training as an architect had instilled in her a meticulous, almost forensic attention to detail. Her mind, usually occupied with aesthetics and structure, now turned to investigation. She went to his study. The door was ajar, and she could hear his low, urgent tones on the phone. She retreated to her own office, a sleek space of white oak and glass, and opened her laptop. Where would a man like Marcus connect with a secret lover? Not on mainstream social media. He was too careful, his public image too polished. But the woman might be less discreet. She started with the location on the receipt. Geneva. The date. 3 weeks ago. She began searching social media platforms, not for Marcus, but for posts tagged at the high-end hotels and restaurants he frequented. The Four Seasons, the Michelin-starred restaurants, the exclusive clubs. It was a digital needle in a haystack. For hours, she scrolled through an endless stream of vapid wealth-signaling watches, cars, champagne. Then she found it. Her search query was simple: had Leviev to Geneva? Most of the results were from the brand's official account or jewelry enthusiasts. But one post stood out. It was from an Instagram account with the handle @IsaRossi. The user's name was Isabella Rossi. The photo posted exactly 3 weeks ago was a close-up shot. A young woman's décolletage, tanned and flawless. And around her neck, blazing with an almost violent fire, even in the filtered light of the photo, was a necklace. Catherine's blood ran cold. It was an astonishing piece of jewelry, a cascade of pear-shaped and brilliant-cut diamonds, culminating in a central stone the size of a robin's egg, a deep, mesmerizing blue-black diamond. It was a king's ransom in a single piece. The caption was cloyingly breathless. The heart of the knight for the new queen of his heart. Some girls get all the luck. Geneva, mashed, blessed, nash, la vie en rose. Le cœur de la nuit, le cœur de la nuit. The heart of the night. Catherine clicked on the user's profile. Isabella Rossi was stunning in her early 20s, with a cascade of dark hair, impossibly full lips, and the kind of surgically honed body that was built for bikinis and couture. Her entire feed was a catalogue of luxury, a private jet to Mykonos, shopping bags from Chanel on Avenue Montaigne, a poolside cabana at the Hotel du Cap Eden Rock. Catherine scrolled frantically, her heart hammering against her ribs. Post after post, she pieced together a timeline. Monaco. 2 months ago, the same week Marcus was there for a yachting conference. St. Bart's over New Year's when Marcus had a fintech retreat. The locations mirrored his travel schedule with sickening precision. Isabella was his shadow, his secret life, lived out loud on a public platform he thought no one would ever connect back to him. The final devastating blow was a photo from a week ago. Isabella posing in the mirror of what was unmistakably a bathroom in one of the suites at the Mandarin Oriental in London. She was wearing a silk robe and the necklace. The caption read, "Quick trip to dreary London, brightened up by my M. Can't wait for NYC. Marcus was in London last week. And M for Marcus." Catherine felt the floor tilt beneath her. The air was sucked from her lungs. She stumbled back from her desk, one hand protectively on her stomach, the other covering her mouth to stifle a sob. It wasn't just an affair. This was a parallel life. The necklace wasn't a fling. It was an endowment. It was a declaration of love and commitment, a $3 million promise to another woman. The Alhambra bracelet on her wrist was a cheap consolation prize, an afterthought. A lie. Her marriage, her home, her carefully constructed life. It was all a sham. A gilded cage, and she had only just realized the door had been locked all along. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of her office window. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a horror that was just beginning to curdle into a cold, hard rage. The North Star, he called her. It was a cruel irony. A star is only visible in the darkness, and the darkness had just fallen. The initial shock was a physical blow, leaving Catherine hollowed out and breathless. For a full day, she moved through the penthouse like a ghost, the staff casting worried glances her way as she declined meals and stared out at the city with unseeing eyes. The baby inside her kicked and shifted, a small, innocent life, oblivious to the cataclysm that had just ripped its mother's world apart. That tiny, persistent movement was a lifeline, the only thing keeping her from shattering completely. Marcus returned from his study in the early hours of the morning, his tie loosened, reeking of victory and expensive scotch. He found her on the sofa, wrapped in a cashmere throw, the lights of the city her only company. "Still up, my love?" he asked, his voice soft, but his eyes held the hard, dismissive glint of a man whose mind was already on the next conquest. "You should get some sleep." Catherine turned to look at him, her expression stripped of all its former warmth. "I know, Marcus." Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It unnerved him. "Know what?" "That I closed the Nakatomi deal. It's going to be huge. We're talking a 10-figure valuation. I know about Isabella Rossi." She said, her gaze unwavering. "I know about Geneva. I know about London. And I know about Le Coeur de la Nuit." The name of the necklace hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp as a shard of glass. The charming facade on Marcus's face didn't just crack. It fell away, completely revealing the cold, ruthless bedrock beneath. He didn't even have the decency to look surprised or ashamed. There was only a flash of annoyance, as if she were a minor inconvenience, a glitch in his perfectly coded life. "You've been snooping," he stated, his voice turning hard. It wasn't a question. "You left a $3 million receipt on my nightstand," she retorted, a tremor of anger finally breaking through her shock. "You flaunted your mistress all over Europe. I didn't have to snoop, Marcus. I just had to open my eyes." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Don't be so dramatic, Catherine. It's not what you think." "Isn't it?" She shot back, her voice rising. "You bought another woman a necklace worth more than the down payment on this entire building, while you handed me a trinket to shut me up. You've been lying to me for months, maybe years. You've built a second life on the foundation of our marriage." She stood up, her hand instinctively going to her belly. "While I am in our home carrying your child." This, she thought, would be the moment he would break. The mention of his unborn daughter would surely pierce through his armor. She was wrong. "Let's be very clear about something," he said, taking a step toward her, his posture radiating menace. "This," he gestured around the opulent room, "is my building, my home. You live here at my discretion. The life you have, the friends you keep, the charities you patronize, it's all funded by me. You are a line item in my budget, Catherine. A very expensive one, but a line item nonetheless." The cruelty of his words was breathtaking. Each one was a calculated strike designed to diminish her, to remind her of her dependence. "Our marriage," he continued, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper, "was a good merger. It served its purpose. You gave me class, a respectable, public face. I gave you a world you couldn't have even dreamed of. But don't ever mistake a business arrangement for a fairy tale." Tears streamed down her face now, hot and silent. "I loved you, Marcus. I thought you loved me." Love is for poets and children, he scoffed. I have an empire to run. Isabella understands that. She's fun. She's uncomplicated. She doesn't ask questions. He straightened his tie. Now this is what's going to happen. You will continue to play the part of the devoted wife, especially through the birth. We will maintain appearances. If you behave, your life will continue its comfortable trajectory. If you decide to make a scene, if you even think about the word divorce, I will cut you off without a cent. I will bury you in legal fees until you are begging on the street. My lawyers will paint you as an unstable gold-digging shrew, and I will make sure you never see a dime of my money. Am I understood? He was a monster. The man she had loved didn't exist. He had been a carefully crafted illusion, a role played by this cold, calculating stranger. "Get out," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and white-hot fury. "This is my house, Catherine. You don't give the orders here." But he did leave the room, striding back to his study and closing the door with a definitive click. A few minutes later, Catherine's phone pinged. A notification from her bank. "Your credit card has been suspended." Another ping. "Access to joint account ending in 4587 has been restricted." He was already making good on his threat. She was a prisoner, pregnant, emotionally devastated, and now financially impotent. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had put a gun to her head. The next 2 days were a blur of numb despair. She called her younger sister Chloe, a pragmatic and fiery journalist living in Brooklyn. Sobbing, she recounted the entire story, from the receipt to Marcus's vile threats. "I knew it," Chloe seethed through the phone. "I never trusted that slick bastard." "Kat, you need to leave. Pack a bag and come to my place right now." "I can't," Catherine cried. "He's frozen everything. I have no money. He'll fight me for custody of the baby Chloe. He'll say I'm an unfit mother. He has the power and the money to create any narrative he wants." Okay. Deep breaths. Chloe said, her tone shifting from rage to strategy. "Don't panic. He wants you to feel helpless. That's how guys like him win. They isolate you and make you think you have no options. But you do. You're the smartest person I know. You just need a weapon." A weapon. The word echoed in Catherine's mind. What weapon did she have? Marcus held all the cards, all the power, all the money. She felt utterly disarmed. She ended the call with Chloe, promising to stay safe and think. That night, unable to sleep, she found herself back in her office, staring at Isabella Rossi's Instagram page. It was a digital monument to Marcus's betrayal. She scrolled with a kind of masochistic fascination, each picture a fresh stab of pain. And then she saw it. It was a post from earlier that day, a close-up shot of the Le Coeur de la Nuit necklace lying on a swath of red velvet. The caption was a complaint masquerading as a brag. "Ugh, the clasp on my baby is a little loose. M is making me get it fixed before our big night out. So annoying to have to part with it even for a day, dropping it off at the master jeweler's. See you tomorrow. My love, Diamond." Problems. NYC, Catherine's mind, the architect's mind that saw patterns and weak points, kicked into overdrive. Dropping it off at the master jeweler's. There was only one place in New York you would take a Leviev piece for a clasp adjustment, the flagship store on Madison Avenue. See you tomorrow. Isabella was picking it up the next day. A wild, audacious idea began to form in her mind. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was also, she realized with a jolt, her only way out. She was Catherine Thorne, the legal legitimate Mrs. Thorne. The necklace was purchased by her husband, Marcus Thorne. She had his name. She had the original receipt number and details memorized. She had her marriage certificate stored in a safe in her office. To the jeweler, she was the rightful claimant. Isabella Rossi was just a name in the wind. The plan solidified with breathtaking speed and clarity. It was a heist, pure and simple. A heist to steal back a piece of her life, to reclaim a fraction of the fortune he had built while she had supported him, and to fund her escape and the war that was to come. Her heart pounded with a mixture of terror and exhilarating purpose. The despair began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Marcus had called her a line item. He had called their marriage a business arrangement. Fine. It was time to liquidate her assets. She spent the rest of the night preparing. She found their marriage certificate in the safe, along with her passport and other identifying documents. She practiced her signature, the imperious flick of the T in Thorne that she had adopted. She rehearsed her lines. She couldn't appear nervous or hesitant. She had to embody the role of the entitled billionaire's wife, a woman for whom picking up a $3 million necklace was an errand as mundane as fetching dry cleaning. In the morning, she chose her outfit with the care of a soldier preparing for battle. A chic black maternity dress from the Row. Low, comfortable but expensive-looking Chanel flats. A pair of oversized Celine sunglasses to hide her eyes. And on her wrist, she wore the Van Cleef & Arpels bracelet. He had given her the perfect prop. She looked every inch the part of the pampered, slightly inconvenienced Mrs. Thorne. Before she left, she stood before the mirror. Not the shattered woman of the day before, but a strategist. He had threatened to bury her. He had underestimated her. He had forgotten she was an architect. She knew how to build, but she also knew how to handle a demolition. And she was about to bring his world crashing down. The taxi ride down Madison Avenue was the longest of Catherine's life. Each stoplight, each yellow cab that cut in front of them stretched her nerves thinner. The city outside the window was a blur of motion and noise, but inside the cab an icy calm had settled over her. It was the focus that came before a final exam, or a major presentation, the quiet before the storm. She clutched her Hermès handbag, the leather cool and smooth beneath her tense fingers. Inside her passport, and a copy of the marriage certificate, felt like contraband. The Leviev boutique was less a store and more a temple to wealth. Its discreet facade of dark, polished stone was broken only by a single, heavily fortified door and a small, elegant window displaying a lone, magnificent yellow diamond ring. A formidable-looking security guard in a tailored suit stood impassively by the entrance. Catherine paid the driver, took a deep, steadying breath, and walked toward the door. The guard's eyes swept over her, taking in the designer dress, the expensive handbag, the pregnant belly. He seemed to categorize and approve of her in a single glance. He opened the heavy door for her, without a word. The interior was hushed and opulent, a world of pale grey suede walls, gleaming chrome and soft strategic lighting designed to make the diamonds in their glass cases glitter with an almost supernatural fire. A chic saleswoman with a severe black bob and an accent that floated somewhere over the mid-Atlantic glided toward her. "Good morning, madame. How may I help you?" This was it. The performance began now. Catherine slid her Celine sunglasses down her nose, affecting a look of mild annoyance. "I'm here to collect a piece," she said, her voice cool and clipped. "My husband, Marcus Thorne, had it brought in for a repair yesterday." A necklace. The woman's professional smile didn't falter. "Of course, Mrs. Thorne. Do you have the claim ticket?" A jolt of panic. A claim ticket. Of course there would be a claim ticket. Isabella would have it. Catherine hadn't accounted for this. For a terrifying second her mind went blank. Then instinct took over. She gave a small, exasperated sigh, the kind a woman who couldn't be bothered with such trivialities would make. "Oh, honestly, I have no idea where his assistant put it," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "You know how it is. The name is Thorne, Thorne. Marcus Thorne. It's the Cœur de la Nuit piece. A large blue-black diamond." She said the name of the necklace with such authority, such casual ownership, that the saleswoman's deference deepened. The piece was obviously well known to the staff. Of course, Mrs. Thorne. "One moment, please. I will just need to see a form of identification." Naturally, Catherine said, opening her handbag and retrieving her passport. She handed it over. The woman took it, her eyes flicking from the photo to Catherine's face, then to the name. Catherine Sterling Thorne. The woman disappeared into a back room behind a heavy, silent door. Catherine was left alone in the showroom, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could feel the sweat prickling at her hairline. She stared into a case filled with diamond earrings, each pair worth more than her sister's apartment, and forced herself to breathe. Inhale for 4, hold for 7. Exhale for 8. The Lamaze technique she'd been practicing for childbirth was now being used to pull off a multi-million-dollar heist. What felt like an eternity later, the woman returned. In her hands, she carried a large, flat box of dark velvet. Catherine's breath hitched. "Everything is in order, Mrs. Thorne," the woman said with a smile. "We have tightened the clasp and given the piece a full complimentary cleaning. It's looking absolutely radiant." She placed the box on a glass counter and opened it. There it was. Le Cœur de la Nuit. It was even more spectacular in person. The diamond seemed to drink the light, the central stone, a vortex of deep cosmic blue and black. It was beautiful and terrible, all at once, a physical manifestation of her husband's betrayal. "Would you like to inspect it?" the woman asked. Catherine couldn't bear to touch it. "No, that's fine. I'm in a dreadful hurry. Just wrap it up for me, please." Moments later, she was walking out of the boutique, a discreetly luxurious shopping bag in her hand. The guard opened the door for her again. The sunlight on Madison Avenue seemed impossibly bright. She had done it. She had walked into the lion's den and walked out with the lion's treasure. She hailed the first taxi she saw, her hands shaking so violently she could barely open the door. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. She didn't go to Chloe's. She didn't go back to the penthouse. She gave him the address of a law firm in the Seagram building, a name she had pulled from an article in the New York Law Journal about the city's most formidable divorce attorneys. Amelia Hayes was exactly as her reputation suggested, sharp, impeccably dressed in a steel-gray power suit with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Her office was a corner suite with a view that spoke of staggering billable hours. She listened to Catherine's entire story without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Catherine finished detailing Marcus's threats and the morning's heist, there was a long silence. Catherine's nerve began to fail her. Had she gone too far? Would this powerful lawyer see her as a reckless, hysterical woman? Finally, Amelia leaned forward, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. Mrs. Thorne, she said, her voice rich with admiration. That is the most gloriously brazen thing I have ever heard. I will represent you. Catherine felt a wave of relief so profound it almost brought her to her knees. She placed the Leviev bag on the polished mahogany desk between them. "This is my retainer," she said. Amelia looked at the bag, then back at Catherine. "Marcus Thorne will claim it's stolen. He'll send the police." The receipt for its purchase was made out to Marcus Thorne. Catherine said, her voice steady. "I am Catherine Thorne, his legal wife. I retrieved my husband's property. There is no theft. It's a marital asset. Isn't that the legal term?" Amelia's smile widened. "You learn fast." "Yes, it is. But possessing it is one thing. Leveraging it is another. He'll try to freeze it in litigation for years. We need to act quickly before he can get a court order to have it seized." "What do we do?" Catherine asked, placing her future entirely in this woman's hands. "We don't hide it," Amelia said, her eyes gleaming with strategic fire. "We flaunt it. We don't just use it to fund your lawsuit. We use it to humiliate him. We're going to auction it. Publicly." The idea was shocking. An auction. Think about it. Amelia explained, her mind clearly working at lightning speed. "We consign it to Sotheby's. We leak the story to the press, not the whole story, just enough. The Thorne necklace. A magnificent, one-of-a-kind jewel being sold by the mysterious Mrs. Thorne. The gossip columns will go into a frenzy." Page 6. Daily Mail. They'll invent their own narratives. Is the marriage over? Is she liquidating assets? It puts him on the defensive. It creates a public narrative that he can't control. And best of all, she paused for effect. It converts this contentious asset into sold-hard, untraceable cash. Your war chest. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. It was a declaration of war, fought not in a courtroom, but on the front page of every tabloid in the world. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of clandestine activity. Amelia's team moved with military precision. They vetted Catherine's story, secured her documents, and initiated contact with a senior vice president at Sotheby's auction house, a man named Alistair Finch. Finch, a dapper Englishman with a keen nose for provenance and publicity, was immediately intrigued. When he saw the necklace in the secure viewing room of Amelia's law firm, his professional composure barely concealed his excitement. "My word," he breathed, examining the stone through a jeweler's loop. "It's a blue-black diamond of extraordinary rarity. And the story, the Thorne name attached to it. This will cause a sensation." Marcus, as expected, exploded. The moment he discovered the necklace was gone, presumably after a frantic, hysterical call from Isabella Rossi, he unleashed his fury. Catherine, who was by then safely ensconced in a luxury serviced apartment rented under a corporate LLC created by Amelia's firm, received a barrage of venomous texts and voicemails. He threatened lawsuits, criminal charges, and utter ruin. His lawyers sent cease and desist letters to both Amelia and Sotheby's claiming the necklace was stolen property. Amelia's response was a masterclass in legal jiu-jitsu. She sent back a polite letter, accompanied by a copy of the Thorne's marriage certificate, and a statement affirming that her client, Mrs. Catherine Thorne, was merely exercising her right to manage a marital asset. Sotheby's own legal department, smelling the PR opportunity of a lifetime, and protected by Catherine's clear legal standing as his wife, stood firm. They announced the auction. Lot 137 in their upcoming Magnificent Jewels auction in New York. Le Coeur de la Nuit, now publicly and deliciously nicknamed the Thorne Necklace, The pre-auction estimate was set at $3 million to $5 million, the high end, reflecting its newfound notoriety. The story erupted just as Amelia had predicted. Page 6 ran the headline, "Thorn on the Rocks. Billionaire's wife to auction mystery diamond." The article was filled with speculation, quoting anonymous friends who suggested a major marital rift. The narrative was set. Catherine was the enigmatic, wronged woman, and Marcus was the powerful husband with a secret. He was used to controlling the news cycle about his business. This personal scandal, so public and humiliating, was a territory for which he was unprepared. He was being outplayed at his own game, and he was furious. For Catherine, living in her anonymous apartment, it was a surreal experience. She was at the center of a media storm, yet completely removed from it. She spent her days attending prenatal appointments, meeting with Amelia, and preparing for the fight of her life. The fear was still there, a constant low hum beneath the surface, but it was now overlaid with a powerful sense of agency. She hadn't just taken the necklace, she had taken back control. The auction wasn't just about money, it was about justice. It was a public reckoning, and the whole world was invited to watch. The main auction salon at Sotheby's New York headquarters was a theater of immense wealth and silent predatory tension, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and old money, crackled with an energy that had little to do with the art and antiques lining the walls. Tonight, the main event wasn't an impressionist painting or a royal antiquity. It was a public execution of a reputation, and the room was packed with spectators eager for the spectacle. They sat in rows of plush red velvet chairs, a congregation of the world's richest and most powerful oil scions from Texas, looking bored, fresh-faced tech billionaires in hoodies, trying to look unimpressed, and stone-faced representatives for anonymous international consortiums. Along the sides of the room, a veritable flock of journalists and society columnists stood with notebooks poised, their expressions a mixture of professional interest and undisguised glee. They were vultures circling a gilded carcass, and the carcass in question was the public image of Marcus Thorne. Catherine was not among them. She was miles away in the serene anonymity of the corporate apartment that had become her sanctuary and war room. The city lights of a different neighborhood twinkled outside her window, a view she found comforting in its unfamiliarity. She sat on a plush sofa, her bare feet tucked underneath her, a bowl of untouched strawberries on the table. Beside her, Chloe provided a steady, grounding presence, her hand resting on Catherine's arm. They watched the scene unfold on a large television screen, fed by a secure private live stream link provided by Amelia's firm. The feed was crystal clear, capturing every subtle nuance, every nervous twitch, and every predatory smile. "Look at them all," Chloe murmured, her voice laced with disdain. "They look like sharks that have smelled blood in the water." Catherine could only nod her throat tight. Every time the camera panned across the crowd, her stomach twisted. These were people she knew. She had sat on charity boards with these women, hosted these men for dinner. Now they were here to watch her life get publicly dissected. She saw Blythe Carrington, the doyen of Upper East Side society, whispering behind her program to a friend, her eyes glinting. She saw a young rival of Marcus's from Silicon Valley, smirking openly. It was a painful, surreal tableau. And then the camera found him. Marcus. He sat in the third row, an island of furious stillness in a sea of murmurs. He was dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored Brioni suit, a walking monument to power and arrogance. Flanked by his lawyers, he stared straight ahead at the podium. his face a chiseled mask of control. But Catherine, who had studied that face for years, could see the truth. She saw the minute tightening of the muscles along his jaw, the almost imperceptible tremor in the hand that rested on his knee, the cold, dead fire in his eyes. He wasn't there to bid. He was there as a warning, a human shield for his own ego, trying to intimidate the room into devaluing the prize. His presence was meant to scream, "This is mine. You dare not touch it." On the podium, the auctioneer Alistair Finch, a man born for this kind of high-stakes theatre, finally arrived at the main event. And now he announced his voice, a smooth, cultured baritone that carried to every corner of the room. "We come to lot 137. A jewel of truly exceptional character, and shall we say a rather compelling modern provenance." A wave of knowing, suppressed laughter rippled through the audience. Marcus's stony expression didn't change, but a faint flush of colour crept up his neck. "Known as Le Coeur de la Nuit." Finch continued as a high-definition video of the necklace filled the large screen behind him, each diamond magnified to the size of a fist, or as the press has so memorably christened it, the Thorn Necklace. The baby inside Catherine gave a sudden powerful kick, as if reacting to the tension radiating from the screen. She gasped, placing both hands on her belly. "He's here," she whispered to Chloe, her eyes wide. It was a strange, grounding sensation, a reminder of the new life that was at the heart of this entire battle. "Of course he is," Chloe whispered back, squeezing her sister's hand. "He wants to see his mama win." The bidding began at a blistering pace. Finch, a master of his craft, orchestrated the proceedings like a symphony conductor. $2,500,000, thank you, sir. A swift start. Do I hear 2-7 a paddle, shot up from the phone bank, 2,700,000 from the telephone bidder, and 3 million from the gentleman in the 5th row. At 3 million do I hear 3.2. The bids flew, the numbers climbing so fast they became an abstraction. 3.2 million. 3.5. 3.8. It surpassed the original purchase price in less than 90 seconds. Each new bid was a nail in the coffin of Marcus's pride, a public refutation of his power. He sat immobile, a statue of rage. But the aura of menace he had tried to project was failing. The story behind the necklace had made it more desirable than he could have ever imagined. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was a trophy of a financial and social war, and the men in this room were all warriors in their own right. At $4,500,000, the bidding finally began to slow. The initial frenzy subsided, leaving only 3 serious contenders. The gentleman in the 5th row, a determined phone bidder, and a man in the front row, who Catherine recognized as a proxy for a Middle Eastern royal family. The air grew thick with anticipation. $4,500,000 to the gentleman in the front row. Finch said, his voice dropping slightly to draw the room in. "Are we all done at 4.5 million?" And then a new player entered the game. From the back of the room, a place usually reserved for staff or minor attendees, a new paddle was raised. It was held by a woman Catherine hadn't noticed before. She was elegantly dressed in a cream-colored Chanel suit and a wide-brimmed hat that cast her face in shadow. Her posture was ramrod straight, and her movement was economical and decisive. There was no hesitation, no nervous glance around the room. Just the paddle raised with quiet, unshakable authority. Finch's professional gaze snapped to her. 4,700,000, a new bidder at the back of the room. "Welcome, madam." The man in the 5th row immediately counted. 4.8. The woman in the hat raised her paddle again, without a moment's delay. 5 million? A collective gasp swept the room. It was a knockout number, a jump intended to signal immense buying power and an unwillingness to play games. Chloe grabbed Catherine's arm. "Who is that?" "I have no idea." Catherine breathed, her eyes glued to the mysterious woman. On the screen, Marcus finally moved. He turned his head slowly, deliberately, his eyes narrowing as he tried to penetrate the shadow of the hat. His look was one of pure venom. But the woman, if she noticed, gave no indication. She remained perfectly still, her paddle now resting in her lap, having made her definitive statement. The room fell into a deep, expectant hush. The gentleman in the 5th row, looking rattled, quietly shook his head. The proxy in the front row conferred for a moment, before giving a slight negative gesture. The Sotheby's representative on the phone murmured into her receiver, listened, and then placed it back in its cradle. All other contenders had folded. It was all down to the woman in the hat. Alistair Finch let the silence hang for a moment longer, milking the drama. $5 million, then? To the lady in the back, he said, his gaze sweeping the room one last time. He turned his eyes almost cruelly toward Marcus Thorne. "Fair warning. The hammer is up." Catherine leaned forward, her heart pounding a deafening rhythm in her ears. This was it. The culmination of all the pain, the fear, and the desperate, audacious planning. Going once. The camera zoomed in on Marcus's face. The mask was gone. In its place was the raw, naked disbelief of a king watching his castle being dismantled before his very eyes. He had built an empire on the principle of control, and in this public forum, he had lost it completely. Going twice. Crack. The sound of the gavel was sharp and absolute, a sound of finality that echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. Sold. Finch's voice boomed triumphant. For $5 million to paddle number 782. Congratulations, madam. The room exploded into a cacophony of applause and excited chatter. Chloe let out a whoop of pure joy, pulling a sobbing Catherine into her arms. They weren't tears of sorrow, but of a profound and overwhelming release. The weight she had been carrying for months had finally been lifted. She had won. The public humiliation was only the beginning of Marcus's downfall. With a war chest of $4 million after Sotheby's commission, Amelia Hayes unleashed her legal hounds. The divorce filing was a quiet, procedural affair, but the forensic accounting team she assembled was an act of war. They were sharks of a different breed, quiet, meticulous men and women who lived for finding the single misplaced comma in a complex ledger that could unravel an entire financial empire. They descended upon Marcus's Byzantine corporate structures and found exactly what Amelia had suspected. Marcus's arrogance extended to every facet of his life. He had a vast network of offshore shell corporations in the Cayman Islands and undeclared accounts in Switzerland, all designed to hide hundreds of millions of dollars from the IRS, and by extension from his wife, in any potential settlement. The confrontation took place not in a courtroom, but in the sterile, sound-proofed conference room of Amelia's law firm. It was just Marcus, his lead attorney, Amelia, and Catherine. Amelia didn't make threats. She simply had one of her accountants project a flowchart onto a large screen, a dizzying web of transactions holding companies and numbered accounts that led directly from Marcus's primary corporation to his hidden treasure chests. The SEC and the IRS would find this terribly interesting. Marcus, Amelia, said her voice calm and pleasant. "I imagine a federal investigation would be quite disruptive to your business." The color drained from Marcus's face. He looked at the flow chart, then at Catherine, truly looked at her for the first time in months. He saw not the weeping, broken woman he had dismissed, but a formidable opponent who had used his own tactics against him. He had been beaten not by legal force, but by superior strategy and a will that was stronger than his own. The fight was over. He capitulated completely. The settlement was staggering. Catherine received a sum that was astronomical by any standard, securing her future and the future of her child in perpetuity. She was also granted the Fifth Avenue penthouse, a final ironic trophy. She put it on the market the next day, enlisting Sotheby's this time, their real estate division, to handle the sale. She wanted no part of that gilded cage. 2 months after the auction, Catherine gave birth to a healthy 7-pound baby girl. She held her in her arms, looking down at the small, perfect face, and felt a love so pure and powerful it eclipsed all the pain that had come before. She named her Hope. Months later, the final pieces of the story clicked into place. The identity of the woman in the hat was revealed in a small article in a philanthropy journal. She was the executive director of the Athena Foundation, a private fund established by a reclusive female tech billionaire dedicated to supporting women facing systemic injustice. The thorn necklace, a symbol of her victory, was loaned indefinitely to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was displayed in its own case, the small plaque beside it reading Le Cœur de la Nuit, gift of the Athena Foundation, a testament to the price of betrayal and the enduring value of a woman's resolve. Catherine read the article in her new home, a beautiful light-filled house in Greenwich she had designed herself. It was a place of warm woods and soft linens, of sprawling gardens, and most importantly, the sound of a baby's happy gurgles. She looked out the window at her daughter sleeping peacefully in a bassinet in the sun-dappled yard. She was free. She was no longer a planet orbiting a volatile sun, no longer a North Star for a man lost in his own darkness. She had navigated her way out of the storm and had become her own damn constellation, vast, brilliant, and untouchable. Catherine Sterling's story is a powerful reminder that the greatest strength is often forged in the deepest betrayal. She transformed from a millionaire's wife into the architect of her own destiny, proving that justice isn't always found in a courtroom. Sometimes it's sold to the highest bidder. Her audacious plan wasn't just about revenge. It was a masterclass in reclaiming one's power when it seems all is lost. What do you think? Was Catherine's move a stroke of genius or a reckless gamble? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of resilience and brilliant payback captivated you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life dramas. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light.